Well, good day, my friends, and welcome to the Hebraic Living Walking with Messiah broadcast. We're excited to have you here with us today as we explore the rich traditions and teachings of Hebraic living, guiding you on a journey to walk in alignment with the Messiah. Whether you're seeking spiritual growth, practical insights, or a deeper connection with your faith, this show is here to inspire and uplift you. In last week's episode, we continued our series reviewing secular views on marriage and what the scriptures have to say about divorce. In today's episode, we will continue our series reviewing secular views on divorce, comparing them to the biblical views, and then we'll do a dive into biblical and secular views of adultery. Now, remember to plug in every Tuesday at the same time to see the show live, and you can also view it on demand on the lambnetwork.tv website. Each show is also recorded and stored on the Daily Torah YouTube channel. So welcome to all our new listeners, and if you're not a subscriber, hit the subscribe button so you never miss a single episode. Now, if you have your Bible or notepads handy, get them ready. We have a lot to cover today, so let's begin. And let's pop up the stage here on the presentation. And let me get it focused here. So today is part C. And my friends, this is a touchy subject, right? I've had some mixed reviews on some of the last episodes. This is our third part. But you have to understand, the viewpoints that I am showing and relaying with you today and sharing with you, you have to do it from a Hebraic mindset and also from a current, today's secular mindset, because they don't always in alignment. We're talking thousands of years of scripture coming up to today, and so the culture has changed. So some of the things that I've been bringing out that are in the scriptures may not align with your current views on marriage, divorce, adultery, fornication, things of that nature. That's why we're going through this deep study. So today is part C, biblical versus secular view on marriage and divorce. And we are in part 5 on secular divorce. So let's get into it, shall we? Now let's look at the legal aspects of divorce. In secular context, divorce is primarily a legal process that terminates the marriage contract between two individuals. So here are some key aspects to this, right? Last week we covered biblical divorce. Today we're going to look at secular divorce. And then we're going to compare the two. Now, one aspect is grounds for divorce. There's a no-fault divorce. Many secular jurisdictions recognize no-fault divorce, where neither party needs to prove wrongdoing. Common grounds include irreconcilable differences or an irretrievable breakdown of the marriage. This approach aims to simplify the process and reduce conflict between parties. Now, there's also, in some states in the U.S., the fault-based divorce. And some jurisdictions still allow for fault-based divorce, where one party must prove that the other party's actions led to the dissolution of the marriage. Grounds for fault-based divorce can include adultery, abandonment, cruelty, or substance abuse. Fault-based divorces can be more contentious and require substantial evidence to support the claims. Now, let's get into the legal procedures. Filing for divorce. The process typically begins with one spouse filing a petition for divorce. This petition includes the grounds for divorce and any claims regarding child custody, property division, and spousal support. And then there's serving the petition, right? We've seen this in movies, right? You got to serve the petition. The petition must be served to the other spouse, who then has an opportunity to respond. The respondent can either agree to the terms or contest the divorce. And then we have negotiation and settlement as part of legal procedures. Many divorces are resolved through negotiation and settlement, where both parties agree on the terms without going to trial. There's mediation and collaborative divorce processes, and they are common methods for reaching a settlement. It goes back and forth between the lawyers. And then you have the court proceedings. If the parties cannot agree, the case may go to court, where a judge will make a decision on the disputed issues. The court process can be lengthy and expensive, but it ensures that both parties have an opportunity to present their case. And the lawyers, my friends, make a lot of money in the divorce courts. And then the third aspect, the implications of divorce. We have property division. Secular divorce laws typically require an equitable distribution of marital property. This does not necessarily mean equal division, but rather a fair distribution based on various factors, such as the length of the marriage, each spouse's contributions, and their future financial needs. If your spouse didn't work, she's probably going to get alimony. If she's been just a housewife raising the kids, you're going to have to pay her alimony in many cases. And that's part of the spousal support, the alimony. And it may be awarded to help maintain their standard of living after divorce. And the amount and the duration of spousal support depend on factors such as the length of the marriage, the recipient's needs, and the payer's ability to pay. So it gets very messy. They calculate everything. It can be very, very messy going down this route. And then there's child custody and support, right? Divorce laws prioritize the best interests of the children. That's what the courts always say, right? And custody arrangements can include joint custody, where both parents share responsibilities, or sole custody, where one parent has primary responsibility. Child support is typically calculated based on the income of both parents and the needs of the children. And it usually goes on to they emancipate at age 18 after they graduate high school. Then that spousal or that child support goes away. So when you go through this, whether you're a believer or you're not a believer, there is psychological impact of divorce. It can have significant effects on individuals, not to mention the families. And my friends, understanding these impacts is crucial for navigating the divorce process and providing support to those involved. It's better not to have to go through this process, as we covered last week and as we will compare here today. And, part of that is emotional distress. Divorce is often accompanied by feelings of sadness, anger, guilt, and anxiety. The end of a marriage can trigger a sense of loss and uncertainty about the future. Both parties may experience a period of adjustment as they navigate new living arrangements, financial responsibilities, and even co-parenting dynamics. And I could share with you for probably the next hour of the experience that I had to go through, as I mentioned last week, when my wife filed for divorce, and I had 4 kids, and we had to go through all this mess. I had to go through alimony, child custody. I had to get a little apartment, continuing my job. I lost almost all my hair. Praise the Lord, I still have hair today. It was a mess. And it was a time of probably one of the worst experiences of my whole life. But the Lord brought me out of that. He gave me back twice as much as what I had before. And, it was a process. I mean, at that time, my friends, and many of you, maybe you've gone through this, right? We can get personal here on this show. So maybe you're at a point, maybe you've gone through divorce before. Maybe, you've gone through this process. And each of us has a choice to make. And I would tell you that when you're going through this process, you're probably not right with the Lord at that time. Because if you were, you probably wouldn't be going through divorce or have gone through it. A lot of times, the enemy gets in there and he causes these divisions on both sides. It's always not one person who's totally at fault. It's always one or the other. Both are involved in this situation. But you have a choice to make, my friends. You can submit yourself to the creator of heaven and earth, just as David did when he went in with Bathsheba, remember, and had a child with her and had your Uzziah killed, and then took Bathsheba as his wife, and that baby died, right? Their child died because there was a consequence for their sin. And I'd be willing to say that each of us have similar things in our lives that we need to come to grips with, and we need to get into alignment with God so that we can navigate his way for our life and not the world's way, not Satan's way to divide and conquer and destroy us. So, my friends, it's better not to go through this, but I want to bring this out in this show because this is part of our Hebraic living, and it affects many believers that are walking this way. Not only those in the world, but in the congregations of Messiah. This is a big, big issue. And then we talked about earlier, the impact on the children, the emotional distress there. They're profoundly affected. They don't want to see mom and dad split up, right? If you went through a divorce, maybe some of you have, I have not, but if you went through a divorce, your parents growing up, you know the impact that it had on you. And you were confused, you had fear, you might have hated one or the other, or maybe both because they were dividing. You may have been sad, and you have to adjust to this new family structure. And then maybe one of your parents got remarried, right? And then you got these blended families. And maybe you have siblings that are now your half brothers and sisters. And then you have these blended families and a new stepmother or a new stepfather. It's a mess. The world is in a mess right now. But it was like this even in biblical times. And we're going to go through some of that probably next week. And then, we need to provide stability for our children. We need to have open communication. We need to give them emotional support. It's essential for them to cope with the transition. And some of the coping strategies are, one, we can seek support from friends, family, or professional counselors. When we're going through that time, there's support networks that bring a sense of community and help individual process their emotions. Maybe you have some of these in your congregation or church or synagogue where you can plug into some of these if you're going through this or have gone through it, and maybe you still need help. So don't be shy. Don't be afraid. Don't think that you have it all together, because we don't. We don't have it all together, my friends. Some of us have deep-seated emotional, psychological issues that we need to be delivered from, generational curses. We have things that we are still struggling with from all our youth and growing up, even till today. And we need to deal with it, and we need to get help. If we need help, don't be afraid to ask for help. humble yourselves before the Creator and ask for the help that you need to get through some of this stuff. And of course, you can engage in self-care activities such as exercise, hobbies, and mindfulness practices. But don't get into like drinking. Don't think you're going to drown out your problems or your sorrow in a bottle of gin, because that's not going to work. So get the help that you need to be able to get through these times together. Now let's look at this and let's compare it with biblical teachings, where secular and biblical perspectives on divorce differ significantly. There are areas where they intersect. Let's see if I can bring myself up here again without messing up the slides. So, number one, grounds for divorce. From a biblical viewpoint, grounds for divorce in the Bible are primarily based on sexual immorality and abandonment. Yeshua, Jesus, emphasizes the sanctity of marriage and restricts divorce to cases of sexual immorality based on Matthew chapter 5, verses 31 and 32, which we'll go through here shortly. And then the secular grounds for divorce are broader, including no-fault options and various fault-based reasons, such as cruelty and substance abuse. The approach reflects the legal and social considerations of modern society. And then the process and resolution. From a biblical standpoint, the process of divorce involves community and religious considerations. With the get, remember I talked about the get last week, which is the divorce document, plays a central role in Jewish tradition. The emphasis was on fairness and justice. So if you have signed a ketubah, you would use a get to be able to nullify that contract, that covenant. From a secular viewpoint, though, you go to the justice of the peace, or maybe your priest or minister or rabbi, Messianic rabbi may do the marriage for you, and then you have to get filed through the court. And so it's governed by legal procedures, and it focuses on protecting the rights of both parties. So then you go through negotiation and mediation and court proceedings, and those are all common methods for resolving disputes. And then the other aspect where they intersect is the implications for individuals. From a biblical standpoint, divorce in the Bible is viewed as a serious matter, right? We know that. I mean, it's very serious, with spiritual and communal implications. The emphasis is on reconciliation and maintaining the sanctity of marriage. But from a secular viewpoint, the laws prioritize the legal and financial aspects, ensuring equitable distribution of property and support for dependents. The focus is on providing a fair and structured resolution to the dissolution of the marriage, right? So you can see there's some similarities there, but really from a secular viewpoint, it's all about me, right? It's all about, what do I get? What property do I get? What money do I get? What spousal support do I get? What child support do the kids get? But from a biblical standpoint, it's more about, what does the other person, how can I benefit the other person and make it, more that's not so much equitable, but you really want to emphasize trying to reconcile and not going through with it from the beginning. So the conclusion of this section is, secular views on divorce emphasize legal procedures, equitable distribution of assets, and the well-being of children. Now, while there are significant differences from biblical perspectives, both approaches recognize the complexities and challenges of ending a marital relationship. Understanding these nuances provides a comprehensive view of divorce and its implications in different contexts. Now, next, we are going to explore the biblical and secular views on adultery, comparing and contrasting them to understand their impact on marriage and divorce. This is going to get very interesting. So let's look. This is part 6 of our multi-part series, and we're going to look at the biblical views of adultery. So let's take a look. Now, let's look at some of the scriptures. If you have your Bibles with you, or you might want to get them out, or just take notes or screenshots as we go through this. But, adultery is addressed in several key biblical passages, highlighting its gravity and consequences. So here are some foundational scriptures that we can go through. In Exodus chapter 20, verse 14, it's one of the 10 commandments, right? It just explicitly says, you shall not commit adultery, right? Doesn't really get into the details of what is adultery. How do we define it? And so this commandment underscores the serious nature of adultery within the moral and ethical framework of the Bible. But it goes much, much deeper. And Yeshua brings this out in the Gospels when he walked the earth. But we can review some of the other key passages in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 10. Now, in Leviticus chapter 20, verse 10, this verse prescribes severe consequences for adultery. It reads, if a man commits adultery with another man's wife. So there now it's starting to define what adultery is. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress are to be put to death. This underscores the importance of marital fidelity in maintaining the sanctity of the community. And we're going to get into the spiritual implications of this here in a few minutes. But let's turn to Matthew chapter 5, verses 27 and 28. In Matthew 5, verse 27, Yeshua deepens the understanding of adultery by addressing not only the act, but also the intentions. Now he says, you have heard that it was said you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. This teaching highlights the internal dimension of sin and the importance of purity in thought and action. But one thing that maybe needs to be further defined here is, what woman is the person looking at? Is he looking lustfully at another man's wife, or is he looking lustfully at an unmarried single woman? There's a distinct difference there, which we'll get into here in a few slides. So let's go back to the Old Covenant. Adultery was typically defined as a sexual relationship that violated another man's marriage. That's really the biblical definition of it. Meaning, if a man slept with another man's wife, it was adultery. And we just read that in Leviticus 20, verse 10. But if a married man had relations with an unmarried woman, it wasn't always labeled as adultery in the same legal sense. Now let's go into it a little deeper. Now, regarding concubines, and I get this all the time, my friends. Oh, people want to have concubines because they feel, in the Bible, Jacob had 4 wives. They had concubines. David had multiple wives. Solomon had hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000 wives and concubines. So why can't I? Why can't I have those, right? Well, in biblical times, a concubine was a woman who had a recognized, though lower status, relationship with a man. She was not a full wife, but had certain rights and protections. Now, a concubine was often taken by men who already had wives, and their status was somewhere between a servant and a spouse. Importantly, a concubine was not just any woman a man slept with. She was part of his household and had a formal, though subordinate, role. Now, my friends, don't let this think if you're men say, oh, I want to go out and get a concubine now. No, you don't want to go this route. And I'm going to explain this very seriously here before the end of the show, because it takes on a spiritual manner. Do you think Jacob's household, that's the best example we have in the Bible? Jacob had basically 4 wives, right? He had Leah, who was the firstborn, and he had Rachel, her sister, that really he wanted her first, but Laban tricked him and gave her Leah first. And then he had both of their concubines, both of their nurses as concubines, Bilhah and Zilpah. So do you think Jacob was happy living in a household with 4 women, always nitpicking at each other? We see it in the scriptures. They were fighting, they were contesting. Leah felt that she wasn't loved. Rachel didn't have any children until 20 years later. And then, I don't know where the status of Zilpah and Bilhah was, but do you think that was a big, happy family with all the children born of the 4 women with one dad? It was a mess. All right, let's just be honest. It was a big mess. But God allowed it to happen for one purpose: to birth the nation of Israel as quickly as possible. So the 12 sons of Israel could be born rather in succession, very, not far apart in ages, and they became the tribes of Israel. So there was a purpose that God had put in place for that. And no other man has fulfilled that purpose in the scriptures except Jacob. So let's understand that. So let's understand also, my friends, if the man simply has sex with a single woman without any formal arrangement, it would not make her a concubine. So if you think you're going out and having relations with other women, that automatically makes them your concubine, you are mistaken. From a Hebraic Jewish law, from the Torah, it is not so. Because in the biblical sense, it's considered sexual immorality. And depending on the context, it could even be classified as adultery. Now, if she were taken into his household as a concubine, that would be a different matter, though still not aligned with the New Testament's call to monogamy and purity, as Yeshua brings out in Matthew chapter 19, verses 4-6, which we're going to get into. Now, let's turn to Matthew 19. And I want to get my Bible out myself. And let's turn to Matthew 19. And let's look into this a little deeper. We're about halfway through our show today, but we're going to spend some time here in Matthew 19. Because I really want to cover this, because this has been a big, big problem in Messianic congregations, in the Hebraic living way of life. Because every man thinks he should have more than one wife. Not every man, but a lot. I get this all the time. I even know Messianic rabbis who thought they could have a concubine and actually ended up getting in trouble and serving time for for immorality and having sex with minors. So, hey, I've been around the block a little bit. I've seen a lot of things throughout this journey. So let's look at Matthew chapter 19. So the Pharisees in verse 3, they came to Yeshua testing him, right? Saying, is it permitted for a man to divorce his wife for any reason at all? And he says, haven't you read? He answered, he who created them, who created them? God the Father, through Yeshua, created them from the beginning, made them male and female, and said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. Now, remember, we went over that word join last week, right? What was that word join? Dabak, which means a covenant between the two, right? And so basically you could read it as, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and have a covenant of love between him and his wife. And the two together shall become one flesh. And he says, so they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no man, or I would say no man or woman, separate. Because today, it seems like a lot of women are filing for divorce. And if you are believers and you are a woman, that's a double sin against you, because you are not allowed to file for divorce against your husband, according to the Torah. So again, there's a lot of, I get a lot of flack from saying things like this, but that is the reality of the situation. And then he says in verse 7, he goes, they said to him, why then did Moses command to give her a certificate of divorce and put her away? And what did Yeshua say, my friends? Because of your hardness of heart, Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. But from the beginning, it was not so. Now I tell you, Yeshua says, whoever divorces his wife, remember, he doesn't say if the wife divorces him, he says, whoever divorces his wife except for sexual immorality and marries another commits adultery. So he does give an out. Yeshua does give an out to the man of sexual immorality, is the out. That if your wife is cheating on her husband and there's not going to be any reconciliation, no forgiveness on both parts, and she continues in her sin and her lust for another man, then the man, to keep peace, is allowed to divorce his wife. And that's the only reason. And there's no mention here about having concubines and multiple wives and things that happened in the olden days. Yeshua is very clear, and we're going to get into it deeper here in the next few slides, because I really want to bring this together on a spiritual level. What is marriage all about? Why did God institute marriage to begin with? We're going to find out here very quickly. Now, let's turn to Jeremiah, because we're going to talk about the biblical views of how it's metaphorically in Scripture that adultery is used to describe spiritual unfaithfulness, such as idolatry or turning away from God. So let's go to Jeremiah chapter 3. Make notes of this. Jeremiah chapter 3 and also Hosea chapter 1. And I encourage each of you to go and read these after this teaching or in your free time. But let's look at Jeremiah chapter 3, starting in verse 1. The Lord inspires Jeremiah to write, if a man divorces his wife and she leaves him to be with another man, will he return to her again? In other words, if you divorce your wife and she goes to another man, will she leave that man and come back to the man that divorced her? And he says, would not such a land to be totally polluted if that happened? And he's calling, Judah here. He says, you are a prostitute with many lovers. Now you're returning to me after I've chastised you, and you went out and were serving the gods of Baal and Ashtaroth and all the pagan gods and bowing before them, even sacrificing their children to Moloch. And you're going to come back to me now that I've chastised you, now that things have gone bad. You're going to come back to me, and I'm going to take you back. And he says, it's a declaration of Adonai. Dropping down to verse 6. He goes, and Adonai said to me in the days of King Josiah, have you seen what backsliding Israel did? She went up on every high mountain and under every green tree, and there she committed adultery. Yet I thought that after she had done all this, she would return to me, but she did not return. Remember, the 10 tribes were scattered throughout all the nations, and they never returned to the Lord, to the land. But he continues, even her unfaithful sister Judah saw it. I noted that when backsliding Israel committed adultery, I sent her away and gave her a certificate of divorce. You understand what's going on here? God sent out the nation of Israel after King Solomon, and the tribes were split, and Jeroboam committed adultery by setting up a new place of worship and was worshiping other gods and made priests of all the common folks and committed adultery against God. God says, that's it. I've had enough. Here is your get out of here. And he dispersed them into the nations. But notice what he says, continuing in Jeremiah 3:8, the second part of verse 8. He says, yet unfaithful Judah, her sister, did not fear. Instead, she also went and committed adultery. And it happened that through her frivolous prostitution, she polluted the land and committed adultery with stones and with wood. Yet after all this, her unfaithful sister Judah did not return to me with her whole heart, but only insincerely. So Judah came back after 70 years being in Babylon, but her heart really didn't come back to the Lord. She had tasted of all the sexual immorality, and she still craved it in her heart. And some people didn't even come back. They stayed in Babylon, modern day Iran, Persia, and some are still there even until today. So what does Paul say about all this, right? In Ephesians chapter 4. He tells us there is one body, my friends. There is one Ruach, one Spirit. Just as you also were called in one hope of your calling. There is one Lord. My friends, there is one faith, one immersion, one God and Father of all, who is over all and through all in all. Yet how many times have we committed adultery to him? Serving other gods, worshiping ourselves, setting up idols of money, of sports, of ourselves, being self-righteous, thinking we are so righteous that we have no sin within us. But yet, like Job, we are self-righteous and we don't even know it. The heart is deceitful. Who can know it? I, the Lord, test the heart. He's testing each of us. Where is your heart, my friends? Is it for the kingdom? Is it for spreading the gospel throughout the world? Or are you happy just working, making money, eating good, enjoying life, going to shul, synagogue on Sabbath? Maybe you don't even go anymore. Maybe you just zoom in because it's so far to travel to go to shul and you're preoccupied and you don't like the music or you don't like the people there. So you just zoom in and maybe you go to Sabbath congregation and then on Sunday you go to a Sunday congregation, right? Because you want to have your foot in both sides, right? Maybe you don't go at all. You just figure, oh, my heart is for God. Here I am, Lord, just as I am. I know you love me and I'll be okay. And when times get really tough, yeah, then maybe I'll really plug in. I'll get serious. And I'll actually read the Bible. I'll actually study the Torah in the Brit Hadashah and the half Torah. But for now, I got a good job, got good food. I got it easy. My friends, there is a time coming. Now, if you're listening to this now, last weekend, Israel bombed Iran. The U.S. bombed Iran on, Sunday night, Saturday night. World War III almost broke out, right? I call it, the Psalm 83 war in the scriptures almost came to fruition. But this was just a foretaste of what's coming. Because we know that Yeshua says that even such will be the times of the end, greater than the times of Noah, greater than the Holocaust, greater than anything you have experienced on earth is coming. When these nations have nuclear bombs and they start dropping them, where are you going to run? You're going to dig a hole in the pit somewhere? Think you got food and water stored up? You don't know where you're going to go. You don't even know where the bombs are going to drop. You think you're going to go live in an RV somewhere out on land and seek shelter? There's going to be gangs roaming those woods and they're going to take you out in no time flat. You have nowhere to escape. The Lord your God, Yeshua HaMashiach, is your only hope. He is your one hope. You're calling the one Lord, and He is over all and through all, and He promises to spare His children from the hour of trial. But maybe some of us have to go through it. Maybe some of us have to be martyrs because we're just not with the program. We think we are, but we're not. What does Revelation say? Satan gets angry and he goes and makes war with the children who keep the Sabbath and keep his testimonies. So maybe, your heart's kind of in it, but you're not really in it. Who do you think Satan's coming after? And he's going to pick you off so fast. But at least you'll be in the kingdom if you die a martyr. Hopefully you give your heart and soul to the Lord. Some will be protected. Some may die natural death before it comes. But I'm telling you, friends, it's coming very quickly. And that's why we're doing this Hebraic living program. This is why I want to get some of this stuff out now. Get your marriages straight. Get yourself straight with God. Put Him first in your life. And then you will have a surety that no matter what comes, it'll be His will. And He will give you the protection, the guidance, the direction that you need to make it to the end. Because what did Yeshua say? He who endures to the end will be saved. So are you going to endure to the very end? Because I don't care what I have to go through in this life. I want to spend the next one with Messiah. And I don't care if I'm cleaning toilets or being a street sweeper. I just want to be in the kingdom with the Lord and hopefully with you. And we're going to be living in a time of peace and joy that we don't even have any clue of how it's going to be. Satan will be removed. The demons will be removed. We will rebuild the waste places. And there will be a time of refreshing. Yeshua will be sitting on the throne in Jerusalem. All those who have ever lived and died in Messiah will be alive, be resurrected. Will be spirit beings. The second death has no power over us, and we will have made it. So the Lord, my friends, is asking. Let me just get this clear. Anyway, the Lord, my friends, is asking for you to be faithful for a very short period of your life, to be true to Him, to not be committing adultery, spiritual adultery with other gods, setting up idols and having fornication, because the Lord wants you in His kingdom. And so He's asking for just a little time to be faithful to Him, to spend all of eternity with Him. And anything that you want and desire in this life will be given to you 100-fold. So, my friends, are you willing to endure until the end? I pray that you are. So let's continue. As we have a little bit of time left here. Let's look at the rabbinic commentary. Rabbinic literature offers further insights into the biblical understanding of adultery. Key sources include the Sanhedrin and the Mishnah 7:4. The text discusses the judicial procedures and requirements for proving adultery, emphasizing the need for credible witnesses and evidence. Right? You need evidence that the person has committed adultery against you, and the stringent requirements underscore the seriousness of the accusation and the need for justice. In the Talmud Sotah 3, verses 8a to b, the Talmud explores the emotional and spiritual dimensions of adultery, discussing the impact on the individual, the family, and the community. It emphasizes the importance of repentance and reconciliation, providing a path for restoration. See, even in the Old Covenant, there were the emphasis was on repentance and reconciliation and restoration. And that should be our mindset also. Now, we're going to briefly go through the secular views of adultery. We have about 10 minutes left here for today's show. So, modern secular views on adultery vary widely, influenced by legal, social, and cultural factors. The legal aspects. Civil laws. In many jurisdictions, adultery is no longer a criminal offense, but may still have legal implications in divorce proceedings. Adultery can be considered a ground for divorce and may influence decisions on alimony, property division, and child custody. Then you have the no-fault divorce. In regions with no-fault divorces, the emphasis on the irretrievable breakdown of the marriage rather than assigning blame. Adultery may still be relevant, but it's not a primary focus in legal proceedings because it's so commonplace now. It's usually the grounds for the divorce. So the judge just says, hey, irreconcilable damages, and he just issues the decree. I can't talk today. So point number 2, social and cultural perspectives. The evolving norms, attitudes towards adultery have evolved with greater emphasis on personal freedom and autonomy. While still widely regarded as a breach of trust, the social stigma surrounding adultery has diminished in some cultures. And then you have the psychological impact. Adultery can have significant emotional, psychological effects on all parties involved. Trust, self-esteem and relationships can be profoundly impacted, and therapy or counseling may be sought to address these issues. And then you have ethical considerations. You have the personal morality. The secular views on adultery often reflect broader ethical principles such as honesty, fidelity, and respect for one's partner. The ethical implications of adultery are considered within the context of the relationship and the expectations of mutual commitment. Now, we covered a lot there today, and we have a few minutes left. And I went through this last two portions, and I really want to encourage my American friends that are listening, our American subscribers here in the U.S., to go to weekendtoremember.com or call that number on the screen, sign up using our group code AMJCC, and then email us and tell us that you've done that and that you're planning to go. These Weekend to Remember will be instrumental in strengthening your marriage, no matter at what stage it is, whether you're young, mid, or older in years of marriage, whether you are having serious marriage issues or you just need to recommit or strengthen your marriage. Great marriages, my friends, don't just happen. You have to work at it. So I encourage each and every one of you to go to weekendtoremember.com, sign up, use our group code AMJCC, and you'll get $100 off per couple. I will be in Dallas, Texas in November. I forget the exact dates right now. I think it's the third week of November. Might be the second week. If you're in the Dallas area, we'd love to meet you there. So I hope to see you there. But go wherever you want. Make a vacation out of it. Go have fun. Hey, this life is fleeting by. Stop worrying about work, finances, invest in your marriage. You have no problem investing on a new iPhone or a new TV or whatever, a new car. Why don't you start investing in your marriage and investing in your spiritual growth? Because what did Yeshua say? Where your heart is, that's where your treasure will be. So start treasuring your relationship with God and with each other. Sign up today because they sell out quickly. There's usually 800 to 900 people at each one of these weekends to remember. So you got to get the early bird special. You'll even save more money on the early bird special. Sign up, book your hotel, go somewhere where you can drive to if it's close, or make an extended vacation out of it. Go have fun and make your marriage great. Now, I also want to tell you, and we've been advertising this, is that we are going to be starting the Art of Marriage small group study. This is an engaging 6-session video-based marriage Bible study offering techniques for a breathtaking relationship through experts, devotionals, spoken word poetry, animation, and more. It includes his or hers workbooks with dedicated challenges for husbands and wives. There's devotionals and even more. And there is also an optional drawn together devotional that includes 52 weekly devotionals to deepen your connection. This begins Wednesday, July 9th at 7 p.m. Central Time. Write me at info@mymdi.org. Just put in the subject line, Art of Marriage. I'll get your email and I'll send you the details. This will be a live online experience. It'll probably go for 7 weeks. I encourage each of you to plug into this also. And we're going to try to limit it to maybe 10 couples. So the first 10 who sign up, and then we'll put the others on on a waiting list. So sign up now. Get plugged in. If you want to learn from someone who's with you every week like this, then it's time to plug in. Okay, we can share things in a more intimate session. These will not be recorded. They will not be stored anywhere. It'll be live, and then when it's over, it's over. What do they say? What stays in Vegas, or what's said in Vegas stays in Vegas, whatever that saying is. So whatever is said here stays there. We don't share it with anybody. So I encourage each and every one of you to plug in, invest in your marriage, my friends. Let's get it together. I mean, let's really, really do it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing some of you on. Look, I have some of the books here. Look, here's the one book. Here's the other book, right? So you got two books. So let's plug in. I'm waiting for you. Send me an email today. You listen to this message? The Ruach is working in your life. It's funny because I got 2 minutes left. I get comments from Messianic people. Well, why don't, do you have is it Messianic based? Does it cover this? Does it cover that? There are no Messianic programs like this, right? Why? Why not? We're always so Torah based, but the Hebraic Living Program, this program, I am gleaning the best of the best from whatever resources I can put together. And we're covering Hebraic words in this study. Chesed, Dabak, Yada. We are covering the biblical words for love, and we're doing deep studies into them. So yes, they are Hebraic themed, okay? Now they're put out by Christian organizations, but they are Hebraic thoughts behind them, right? So we're all brothers and sisters. Don't think that you are so above other people, because let me tell you, there's things that we should be doing in the Messianic community that we're not doing. Okay, we're so disunified in so many ways, in so many areas, it drives me crazy. And we'll get into that another time. But until then, plug in, and we will see you next week. So God bless, and give us the thumbs up, okay? And share this with your friends and family. Have a good week. Good night. If you missed today's show, or want to watch it again, or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lambnetwork.tv, where you will find this show and all the other live Lamb Show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network. We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the lambnetwork.tv website. I'm Jeffrey Clark. Thank you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.